Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining another session of Hablemos, conversations about leadership, inclusion, and purpose with very talented humans and humans that are sharing their story and willing to share their story with the world and create impact in that way. Today, I'm honored to be hosting Yvonne Castaneda. She is an author and mental health professional, and she's going to tell us more about her beautiful book, which I'm honored to read. I've been reading it and devouring because there's so much power in your story, Yvonne. But first of all, let me say hi, Yvonne. How are you today?
Hola, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for asking. I'm so happy to be here and to be
And
part
we're
of your podcast.
I'm happy to host you. We're happy to have you. That beautiful background. I always love when people have plants because it means there's life,
Yeah,
there's greenery.
yes, and I need it because in the winter, like here in Boston, that background looks very different. So I need the green, the contrast between snow and green, very
Not so much green, more white.
more white and gray, and a little darker.
Oh, but Ivan, for those who don't know you yet, which I imagine there's not too many out there, tell us more about you. Tell us more about your story, your heritage, who's Ivan, and tell us more about what encouraged you to become that author, that beautiful author you are.
Okay, that's let me see if I could give you a version that doesn't last 7 hours. So I was born in Los Angeles, California. My mom is Mexican and my father was Cuban. They met in Los Angeles. My father came from Cuba in 1962, 61. I always forget the year. But he came obviously after the revolution. And then my mom came, to work, and they met in Los Angeles, and, we got married and had myself and my brother. We lived in LA for like 7 years, and we were surrounded by my mom's family. Like, my mom comes from a family of 18. Like, yeah, it's a huge family. So we had lots of cousins. And then we moved to Miami when I was 7, and I think my dad just wanted to be closer to his tribe, like his people. And we moved to Miami, and like we really grew up in Southwest Miami. And at the time, we grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly white. I think we were the first Cuban family or the second Cuban family to live there. And we were definitely influenced by everything white, and didn't think anything of it obviously at the time. So we like grew up watching American shows, we grew up watching movies, like really just all white. And so we grew up in this culture. I stayed in Miami until I was 17 years old, and when I was 17 I graduated from high school. And I had scholarships and stuff, and ended up moving, no, or going to Mexico and kind of staying there indefinitely.
Oh, I didn't know that you went to
Yeah,
Mexico.
well, I wasn't sure. I had that pressure, and I'm sure that this resonates with a lot of us that are like first gen. I had that pressure. You have to go to college. My father
Mm.
absolutely adamant. My father was a construction worker, and mommy worked in a school cafeteria, and both of them are uneducated, like illiterate. And so my father was always like, "You have to get an education. You have to get an education." But he didn't necessarily know how to do that or what that meant. It was more like, figure it out, but get an education. And we had that ideal. You go to college, and then you get a good job, and you get married, and you buy a house with a white picket fence, and like there's a dog, and like maybe a husband and a few kids and all that stuff. So, but that like clashed internally with me. It was such a conflict. And
Mm.
I wasn't sure that I wanted to go to college to study music. I was a pianist, and I ended up staying in Mexico. So I stayed there for about 6 months. I came back and realized that I really wanted to study something, and I fell in love with international relations. So I studied international relations at wonderful FIU. I went to Miami-Dade first, and then I went to
Woo!
FIU. Heck yeah, I'm really proud of my education. Went to Dade, I went to FIU, and I loved my degree. Like, loved it. What I didn't love was how many people constantly asked me what I was going to do with it. Once again, it's like that same, what are you going to do? How are you going to make money? And it was always money. The focus was, oh, you got to get a job with good money. Because, in our family, and maybe in a lot of Latino families, I can't speak for every Latino family, but there's this like, certainly like immigrant families that don't have a lot of understanding of what's available. It's, you got to be a doctor, a
Right.
lawyer, the white collar profession. And
And
so
we had also, Yvonne, in one of the conversations we had, we also talked about the scarcity mentality, and that's where we come from, right? And so it's always about how do we become more secure, and we associate getting a job like what you mentioned, doctors, lawyers, with getting that stable job that it's going to produce a reliable income, right?
100%, it's about safety and security. And you know what? At the time, I didn't understand it, but I respect it. And I have a lot of compassion and empathy for my parents and what they wanted for us. But I think at the time that was really hard. And so I struggled in my 20s big time to kind of find my place and trying to figure out, trying to find that unicorn of a job, which is, fulfillment and security and safety, and struggled a great deal. And it probably wasn't until my mid 30s that I really things just started to come into focus. Like I started to get a better understanding of what I really wanted. And I think I always had a very strong pull towards service. I wanted to help other people, but I didn't know what that looked like. And in my mid 30s, I discovered like that I really had true passion and love for fitness. And I went into the fitness industry, and I was in the fitness industry for about 12 years. And that actually brought me to Boston. And once I was here in Boston, I was a general manager of a very large luxury health club, the Sports Club LA in Boston. And I had that moment. I remember thinking like, I was looking at my maintenance team, the housekeeping team, and they were all like Colombian, from El
Mm.
Salvador, people like my mom, people like my dad, and like hearing about their challenges. And I remember thinking like, I have been serving like a luxury wealth population. I have been working with a very wealthy, privileged population as a general manager. And hey, I'm not judging that. I'm saying it, suffering is relative. Everyone, has their own path. But I think what I recognized in that moment was, I think I was raised to, again, find your place in the white world and don't look back. And I had a problem with that. Like, I kind of want to work with the people that actually help me get to the level of financial and professional success at which I found myself. And these people are immigrant families. And it just became like a thing I couldn't unsee. I couldn't not think about it anymore. And so I eventually found social work. And what's funny is that I thought social work was DCF, Department of Children and Families. You go and you take kids from their home. And although that is a function of some social workers is a very big umbrella under which you can do lots of different things. I wanted to be a therapist. And more specifically, I was like, I want to work with Latino families, immigrant families. Like, I want to know what it would be like if people understood themselves better. I just knew that that's where I wanted to go. And so I found the Latino Leadership Initiative at Boston College. And I applied, and everybody thought I was absolutely out of my mind. I was 45 years old, starting a master's program. And of course, there came the questions, but how are you going to make any money? Like social work, they don't make any money. You're walking away from 6 figures to do what? And to get into how much debt? That's loca.
What is that about passion? No. Yeah, I can only imagine, me imagino
Ave María.
en tu familia. And so how did you find that strength in you to also tell your family, no, but this is what I'm going to do, and you need to respect that without sounding disrespectful? Because I feel like as children of very strong Latino parents, anything you say can be seen as disrespectful if it's not like yes dad, yes mom. So
Claro.
how do you set that put that stick on the ground?
Oh, I appreciate you so much for saying that. Te digo la verdad, like but at this point in my life, at that point, my father and my mother, God bless them, had really gotten used to, ahora va a cambiar de nuevo. Oh, now she's changing again. Like, I think that I remember having a conversation with my dad because I was, again, I was in my 30s and I was working in fitness and I was actually making like good money doing what at the time I really loved. And my father would continue to like, Mija, immigration is hiring, Department of Homeland Security. They have really good benefits and it's a secure job and was still kind of there. And I finally, at that point I was like, papi, for me, it's fulfillment. It's,
Mm.
what I want to do has nothing to do with money. I need money, lógico. And I like having money. Don't get me wrong, but it's not my primary motivator. And I don't know that I'm built for that. And I tried that. I tried to work in the corporate world. I had, financial success in some of my jobs, but I was absolutely dead on the inside and I was miserable. And that kind of leads to why I had such severe mental health issues in my 20s, like late teens, 20s, and even into my 30s, and substance use problem. I was miserable. I was really unhappy and disconnected from, like, what am I supposed to, this isn't my thing. And so, at 45, when I decided to go to graduate school, really a big piece of it, I remember my husband, who is Colombian, and he was like, "But how much is that gonna cost?" And God bless them, same mentality. How much is that gonna cost? I'm like, maybe like 100,000, but it's okay. I'll take out loans. I'll take out loans.
Oh boy.
And I was like, you know what? I don't care. I don't. If money is the only thing holding me back, that's silly. You know.
Exactly.
And I think we talked about this before. I'm very much so guided by faith, like by faith in God. And I'm like, it's gonna work out. It's gonna work out. It's just gonna work out. And if I have debt to pay off, then it'll work out. I'll pay it off. Something it'll be okay.
And I appreciate you saying that so much because I do believe that when we come from a place of abundance, a place of love, a place of certainty, a place of, um, I don't know, for some people it's God, for some people it's energy, vibes, whatever it is that we call it, things will find a way. We will find a solution. We will win, right? And that's ultimately, it's all a path, but we will accomplish what we need to accomplish in the way that it needs to be accomplished. So everything's solved for us. We just need to follow that path.
Yes. And that took me a very, very long time to learn. And that's why I suffered a great deal with an eating disorder, alcohol problem, cigarettes, exercise addiction, the whole gamut. Um, because I didn't listen. But I heard, but I didn't listen.
Mm.
There was always that voice. I remember getting another job in the corporate world, and I kept getting enticed, by the carrot of money and like better benefits and more salary and this, that, and the third. And I remember one of the jobs that I took, the last corporate job before I discovered fitness, that I had that like feeling like, this is a bad idea. You're not gonna you're gonna be miserable. And terca, I did it anyway. I was like, no, yeah, no, and tried to like fit myself into the mold. Like, no, but this is a great job. It's a great salary. Ooh, there's lots of travel. Like, I looked at all the ways that it looked good on paper. And I was also like, I'm very honest. I was in my late 20s when that time in my life, it was very much so about keeping up.
Mm.
Other people are doing this and they're making this much money and I need to do this too. And I was super vulnerable and influenced by that. And, I took that job anyway. Well, 3 months later, I'm having a crisis. I'm like, I was working for a company that managed spas. I'd never even gotten a massage. What the hell was I thinking?
No, but that's a great point, Yvonne. And I think we all go through that, right? I mean, in different stages, maybe something that happens when you're in your 20s and trying to keep up with appearances happens with people in their 30s, in their 40s. It doesn't necessarily, to me, it doesn't necessarily mean an age, but or it's linked to an age. It could happen to anyone at any point.
Absolutely.
But what's key here is, what did you do to overcome that, to understand what your value was, to understand what your why was, and really start working towards what you really make you happy?
Yeah. Oh, such a great question. And yes, Carolina, I appreciate you saying that, because yes, I think that 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 pressure, like I have to do what my peers are doing. I think that's very real for a lot of people. And you're right, it's not just specific to our 20s. It is, I've worked with people in their 30s and 40s and are still kind of like going through that. So I think honestly for me, at it's like in my mid 30s, and I had come through a 7-year period of what I call like the darkest period of my life. And I had been married, I'd gotten a divorce, and then I ran into another relationship right away because I felt like, my worth as a woman is nothing unless there's a man in my life and I'm married. And so I ran into another relationship, which was just really toxic and unhealthy. And that relationship ended. By grace of God, I had the common sense to listen to myself for once and go, this isn't right. Like, you need to be brave. You need to leave this relationship. It's scary, but you need to leave it. And so I did. And then after that, I remember I moved into my own apartment again. And I just, Carolina, it's like, when I think about it, I'm like, it's not that I read a playbook and I was like, oh, this is what I need to do. I honestly just started to listen, like, intuitively. What do I need to do? I recognize that these relationships that didn't work out, it's not their fault. I can't blame them. There's something here for me that I need to explore. And it was almost like this reckoning, where I recognized I'd been running like from myself and running from a lot of different things, and I had to stop. And what I'd learned about myself definitely was that I was like an expert coper. Like, I owned coping. And I was a master at it. A master. I mean, I exercised. It was like an exercise addiction. I exercised. I drank a lot of wine. I smoked. It was such a weird life, like during the day I was working out and working as a personal trainer. The irony of that is not lost on me. And then in the evening I would, have wine and smoke, and I just kind of, cope and really suppress the holy hell out of my emotions. And so when I moved into that apartment, I made a very intentional decision to not cope. I wasn't sure what would happen, to be honest. I just knew that there was like una tormenta, it was a storm, and I needed for it to calm. And again, guided by faith, that year, I purposefully decided not to date. I remember my father being, mija, por favor, please don't rush into another relationship.
Mm.
Your time, And so I listened, and I read the Holy Bible in bits. I read A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, which is probably one of the most profoundly, like, just one of the most impactful books I have ever read. And I didn't read it all in one, like right away. It was a lot for me to process. So I would read and then kind of be with it and think about it. And I call like that year of like reconciliation, like to really explore all parts of me and recognize what I had done myself, how I'd hurt myself. And I guess like really finding truth for myself and learning. I think probably the biggest thing that I took away from that was forgiveness. And it wasn't asking God forgiveness, because I already knew that I'd been forgiven. It was, man, I'm so mean to myself. Like, wow, I'm so mean to myself. And like really forgiving myself. But when I say that was a process, girl, that was a process. That was no overnight situation. That was like, I remember like at the 9-month mark of that year that I had this like overwhelming feeling. I was sitting on the beach in Mexico. I'd gone there with my parents and I was alone, and I was just sitting on the beach. I'd gone for a walk, and it was like somebody poured a bucket of cold water like over me, and it was overwhelming. And I felt in that moment, or I knew, not beyond feeling, I knew that everything was always going to be okay. That was it. It was, everything is always going to be okay. And I don't need validation of a man. I don't need to find my self-worth in a job, and I definitely don't need to find my self-worth in my appearance. These things don't matter. What matters is what I have to offer
Oh
the
my
world.
God,
What can
Yvonne.
I give? And that's not to say that I didn't have like challenges after that. Of course I did. I'm human. But it was really like a turning point. It was a turning point. Like, okay, you're stronger than this. You're gonna keep going. Something shifted for me, big time.
Yvonne, it's so beautiful. I mean, eh, I'm I'm so appreciative of you sharing your story because you're so open to sharing. And when I hear you speak, I can find things that apply to myself, and I firmly believe that when people hear your story, they find bits and pieces that associate with them. I mean, sometimes it's interesting to see how we when we don't know how to really how to cope or fix things in a healthy way, we
Yeah.
end up damaging ourselves and hurting ourselves and hurting the ones that we love the most. So
Oh,
it takes a lot of work, but it's also beautiful to hear you say that we can also fix ourselves, that we can also have honest conversations with ourselves, with those who elevate us, who hold us, who take care of us. Be open to that, right?
yes. And you know what? I think the hardest thing, and this was a big reason for why I wrote the book, is I didn't learn. I didn't learn to be with my emotions. I don't know anybody who did. Maybe the
Hmm.
younger kids now are learning and they're changing the way things are done, but certainly in my family, like in Latino like culture, girl, you do not show weakness, vulnerability is no, 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 que van a pensar.
Hmm.
Like we're always like the picture of like my family,
Perfection.
always like, oh, que van a pensar, que van a pensar. It's all about like what are people gonna think, and it was very much so like always looking for external validation of
Hmm.
ourselves. And then on top of that, it's just like suppress the hell out of all of your emotions, not the good ones. You can be happy and joyful and all of that, but when it comes to anger, don't be angry. Don't be sad. Don't be upset. Oh, it's in the past. Move on. You got to be strong. And when I think about that, I recognize that there's purpose and value in like finding that strength in you. And there's also purpose and value in those other emotions. I think, when I think about it now, like whenever I'm angry or I'm upset about something, rather than like feel bad about that, it's so weird. In a weird way, I'm kind of excited because for me, it's an indicator that there is room for growth. Something made me mad, something upset me, right? So I'm like, okay, let me explore what is it about this situation that has upset me, because clearly there's space for me to grow, not space for me to blame somebody. It's just okay. I'm still growing, we're human. We continue to grow. So yeah, I think our culture kind of our ways of dealing with our emotions holds us back. And so I like to share because I recognize that for many people, it's certainly in our culture, like we're so afraid to express our vulnerabilities and times where we've been weak and insecure. And I'm like, I'm super open. I was a hot mess express for sure. Like my 20s, I was so driven by ego, by wanting that external validation. I hurt people. Was yeah, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of good in that too, but no, I was yeah, I hurt a lot of people and I hurt myself, So, if I can share that and it resonates and maybe provoke some thought about, wow, hmm, maybe it's okay for me to share. And think about this, Carolina, like and I work with a lot of couples in that like for example, like even in my own relationship, and again, I'm very honest, like certainly in the beginning, I'm still growing, right? And like if something upset me about, a situation, I would find a way to like compartmentalize that and not really share it because I didn't want to upset my partner. Or if my partner was upset, it would upset me. And then I would like jump through hoops to try to make it better. And I realized, maybe there's a different way of being in a relationship. Like maybe it's okay to let people be upset, to let them have a tough moment, because I learned to be with tough moments. And that was a total shift in how I show up in relationships. Whereas before it was just different.
No, absolutely. And I do want you to share more about the process of the book. So when did you decide, or what was that life story behind, hey, you know what? I think I'm gonna write a book. and then and then the whole process of I'm going to pour it all in and be so transparent, because you go through your whole life
Hmm.
in the book, and all your struggles and all the good things, the bad and the ugly, right? And I don't know, it takes a lot of guts, let me tell you, Yvonne, because I know there's things that we don't feel so sure about sharing because of that.
Yeah.
hmm, I don't know what my parents will say, oops.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you know, how was that process for you?
Well, first, I mean, I have the funniest story about like when I decided that I would write a book. I was 10. No, yeah, well, yeah, 10. I was like, when I was a kid, I'd love to read. Mommy used to take me to the library and I would check out like 30 books. I was like a voracious reader. I'd love to read. And I don't know, somewhere along the way, I started to have this vision of me with a typewriter. Because remember, I'm from the dark ages. So I had a vision of me with a typewriter, like typing a novel. And so when I was 10, I was like, my mom was like, what do you want for your birthday? And I was like, oh, I want a typewriter. And she's like, gay? Like, what is that? And so I kind of told her. And so she saved money from her paychecks every week. And then we went to see her. She bought me a typewriter. When we brought it home, I put it on the dining room table and I put in a piece of paper. And I don't know what I was thinking. And I was like, okay. And then I realized I don't really know what the hell I'm going to write because I'm 10. And so I just typed, someday I will write a book, on a sheet of paper. And I pulled the paper out and I kept it. So when I was like in my late 20s, I actually wrote another book. And it was semi-autobiographical. It was based on my life experiences, but there was a lot in there that didn't happen. And it's kind of like a coming of age story. And when I look at that book and I read it or I think about it, it really was like the funny side of my life, because there was a lot of funny and my parents are hysterical. And but then I remember after that, somebody asked me, are you going to write another book? And I was like, my mom actually asked me, Mija, why didn't you write in your book about the eating disorder? And what she didn't know was at the time I was still struggling with it. And I told her, Mami, no, eso sería, that would be like another book, And I remember thinking back then, I'm going to write that book, but I just don't know when. I knew I wasn't ready, but I knew that there was a book in there. It was almost like the book was there. I just needed to find it, get to that point. So when I started actually in 2013, I left one job and I was kind of started to transition out of fitness or thinking about it. And I started to write it. And it was clunky. It was hard. It didn't flow. And I had the good sense to realize I'm not ready. I'm getting closer, but I'm not ready. And then when I got to graduate school, my first year of graduate school, learning more about mental health and patterns and family systems and so forth, that's when it really hit me, because I was thinking, wow, I wonder how many books written by a Latino or Latina on mental health exist for the Latino population. And I did a search, and at the time there really just weren't that many. And I don't know, I just had a strong calling to it. Like, I need to write this book and I want to write this book. And I was ready. So I started to write it. I don't know where I found time, to be honest, because graduate school is no joke. And I was working full time. And I wrote, and it kind of just came along. And then in 2019, my father passed away. And I'd written like a good chunk of it, but I paused. Obviously, I was in no place to write. And then a few months after my father died, I remember I woke up and it's almost like I could hear his voice, Mija, see, like, keep going. Don't stop. And I was like annoyed because I actually didn't want to write. But I started writing it again. And it was a way, I recognized, like, the beauty of it was that it was a way for me to keep my father very present in my life. It was a way for me to grieve. It was like such a beautiful
Mm.
process. Like, because so the book is really me, my mom, my dad, and my brother. Like, there aren't a whole lot of characters in the book. And so it was a way for me to like reflect on my father's life, on our life. And then finding a literary agent was a process that I never want to do again ever. Um, I found a literary agent. It didn't work out. And then, of course, I was doing the hustle on my own, like trying to find an independent publisher, a traditional publisher. I toyed with self-publishing, and it just wasn't happening. But like I said, this is where faith kicks in. I wanted to quit. I was like, you know what?
Maybe
Maybe
it's not the right time.
this is what I'm meant to be,
Right.
you know? But his voice, like, no, keep going, keep going. So my very last email,
Oh my God.
when te lo juro, like it was the last. I said to myself, okay, these are the last publishers I'm gonna reach out to. And I prayed on it. I was like, God, if it's meant to be, I trust you, I believe you. And if not, then maybe I'll find another route, or I'll just put it down and let it go, and that's it. And sure enough, boom, Santa Monica Press reached out to me and wanted to see more. And then we had a couple conversations about, joining Santa Monica Press, and then the rest is history. And
Wow.
yeah, I was floored at how quickly it all kind of happened.
When it's meant to be, right? The last company, and there it is. And I love that this is a tribute to your dad as well. Because
My parents,
it's
they,
about their story too and their impact in your life.
yes, and like you said, the good, the not so good. And this is why when people ask me, oh, it's a book for young adults. Yeah, it's a book for young adults for 15 to 18. And I actually have had more like adults read it who are Latino, who will come to me and say, girl, I had never looked at this in this way. I had never
Mhm.
considered that maybe the way that I was raised in terms of my emotional health would have an impact on how I show up in the world today. And also, I think it's helped adults who have teenagers, first gen, who are maybe struggling with their own mental health. And my goal for the book was, I don't just want the 15 and the 18-year-olds to read it. I want families to read it. I want a mom and a daughter to read it,
Mhm.
because then it'll be a much deeper understanding of mental health.
Absolutely. Because then you understand where they come from, right? Where your parents are coming from. Maybe we don't all know everything.
No.
Nobody does.
Mm-mm.
So for them, it's also not necessarily a struggle all the time, but it's also a path, right? Okay, how do I do this? How do I raise a child? I don't know how to raise a child. I don't know how to do things,
Yes.
or how to communicate my emotions. Nobody taught them, so
All
it's also a very interesting way of connecting with your parents. I agree 100%.
day. Yeah. And I love that you said that. Like, I think that we think yeah, I think there comes a moment in our lives where we realize our parents are human. Like, oh, they're like people. They're not just our parents. Like, they had lives before us. And I was always very curious growing up. I always wanted to know about my parents' lives. I had a good understanding. But as I got older, obviously that understanding deepened more and more. And I started to see them more and more for like who they were as people. And that really helped me understand myself, and like just why I did the things that I did, why I acted the way I acted, all of it, like all of it. So it's definitely like a tribute, like, to my parents. But I think when I think about really like the why, like you said, like, this idea of purpose, and I used to think that purpose was a vocation, like a thing that you do, a job. And I had a lot of thoughts about that, like, oh, this is my purpose. And I think that as I've had a lot of experiences, obviously, and a lot of spiritual growth, like, I've really come to hone it down to something very different. Like, my purpose is not a vocation. My purpose is to love other people. My purpose is to love and serve. That is my purpose. Now, how I do it is through mental health. How I do it is through maybe a book. And how I do it, yeah, but that's, my being an author or being a professor or that's not my purpose. That is my vocation. My purpose is to love and serve other people. That's
I
it.
love that.
Wow, that made life a whole lot easier.
I love everything about you, Yvonne. I mean, it truly, there's only a few instances when you meet people and they have so much to give just by sharing their own story. Because I feel that there's only with special people, with certain people, they share their stories and I can find myself in them. And that happens to me with you, Yvonne, because when you share and you're so open to sharing, and that's what strikes me. And that's why I keep inviting you to everything that I can invite you to, because it's so beautiful. It's so, you are so beautiful. And I truly believe that, yes, your purpose and your why is to love and serve. And that's what we're connected, because I believe in that as well, deeply. And I can see it in you. Thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, thank you so much. I want to hopefully get to a point where I'm like, okay, maybe I can like rest. No.
Well, maybe if you go to Mexico and celebrate somebody's birthday, maybe you can rest then.
I hope so. I mean, it is, I told you my grandmother's turning 101.
That's
Right.
beautiful.
And so here's what's hilarious about this is that every year since my grandmother turned 85, every year my cousins will say, sí, Yvonne, le tenemos que celebrar. We have to get together because we don't know how many years she has left. And we're like, oh, yeah, it's getting very close. Right after and now we don't say it. Now we're like, yeah, let's celebrate her birthday. When she was 9, her birthday is extraordinary. And again, I draw a lot of strength from her. And it was, I think you asked me before we started filming, like, what was like a defining moment, like in my life? And I was 17 and in Mexico. And, my parents had returned to Miami. So I was in Mexico with my grandmother, staying there, and my family. And I remember we were talking about college and her understanding of that. I had gotten like a scholarship and was I going to go? And I remember telling her, ay, abuela, es que no sé. And she was like, well, basically like, why don't you want to go, or what's going on? And I said, I'm so afraid to make a mistake. I'm afraid that I'm going to pick the wrong thing. And I don't really know what I want to do with my life. And my grandmother stopped what she was doing. We were making pozole. And she stopped for a moment. She goes, ay, mija, ya verás. Algún día sabrás lo que la vida quiere de ti. Like someday you will know what life wants from you. And that, Carolina, to this day, so radically like impacted me. I don't know that I fully understood. I didn't understand that until later, right? Where again, it's about we're conditioned and how we're raised to what is life going to give me? What am I going to get? I'm going to get a job. I'm going to make money. I'm going to get a house. All these things that we get through work, of course, but it's really focused on getting and never
given.
Right? The idea that what life was about was what I had to offer rather than what I was going to get was really radical. Like, I don't know what the hell this lady's talking about, but it's impacting me somehow.
Thank God for grandmas. Thank God for nuestras abuelitas. Thank God for parents. Thank God for family more than anything. Yvonne, I don't want to let you go before, how do people get access to the book? How do they find the book? That's very important. Okay. But also, how do they get a hold of you if they want to see you, meet you, talk to you? You're also a mental health professional, social worker. I mean, you can provide therapies, you can support people. So in the Hispanic community that always needs support. So those two things are very important for you to share.
For sure. I mean, I think probably for the book, right? For people who say like live in Miami, I think the Books and Books in Coral Gables has actual copies in the store. Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, pretty much any of the outlets sell the book. They may not have it in the store, but they can order it. But I mean, Amazon is an easy get for the book. In terms of like how do people get a hold of me, I have a website. It's soulfuerza.com. That's like my personal website, and contact information is on there. I'm also on LinkedIn. And I'm available. I'm not necessarily available for mental health because my caseload is a zoo and I have a wait list, and it's just very hard right now because so many people need help. But I am available for speaking engagements, whether it's about the book or life story or even training. And this is a way that people can get a hold of me. So I'm fairly easy to get a hold of.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And say that your LinkedIn profile once more.
My website or LinkedIn profile?
LinkedIn profile.
LinkedIn is Yvonne Castaneda, my
Perfect.
first and last name.
Amazing. And yeah, it's Castaneda, but obviously in the US, the keyboard does not allow us to use the ñ. So I have an issue with that. Hopefully that will change at some point because we need we need the ñ. It's so important.
Yes, and the upside down question mark.
Exactly. Oh, that's another one. Or the upside down, like when you say what is it, the exclamation point?
Yes.
There's also an upside down one. We need to talk to someone about this. Our issues.
Yes.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Yvonne Castaneda with ñ.
You are so welcome. It's such an honor, Carolina. I appreciate you so much. I am so grateful for everything that you do and shining a light on different people. It's so needed. It's so necessary.
It's so needed. That's what we do it out of love, right? Love and a passion for serving others.
Yes, exactly. Kindred spirits.
Kindred spirits. I love this. Thank you, Yvonne. I'm sure that I will keep inviting you soon to other conversations. I will keep you abreast of all the speaking engagements as well, because I think more and more people need to hear you, need to hear your story, need to hear your heart.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you. Have a safe travels. And then everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.